Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. I think you're going to love this episode. I knew my guest Melody was amazing. I just read her bio before I hit record, and I got double impressed again. I think you're going to get impressed too. Let me tell you a little bit about what to expect in this episode. Melody works with sensitive strivers, and we talk about how HSPs often over-explain. She talks about common challenges in the workplace, and she's got some solutions. She talks about the strengths of HSPs in the workplace, when we struggle with imposter syndrome, how to speak up and use our voice, how to manage stress. Melody knows her stuff, and she has a book that you'll be hearing about too. So you really are going to be enlightened by someone who really knows what she's talking about. I think I'm double fangirling again, thinking, man, I'm just very, very impressed. This was a fun episode. We talk about so much tangible things that happen in the workplace, and it's not something that I talk about a lot. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you're enjoying the podcast, you can really help me out by sharing it with other people. If you want to rate and review in iTunes, if anybody's listening in iTunes, that would really help me out. No pressure at all, though. Let me tell you about Melody. Prepare to be wowed. Melody Wilding, LMSW, is the workplace success coach for smart, sensitive high achievers who are tired of getting in their own way. Named one of Business Insider's most innovative coaches for her groundbreaking work on sensitive strivers, her clients include CEOs, C-level executives, and managers at top Fortune 500 companies such as Google, HP, Facebook, Netflix, Twitter, IBM, Citibank, JP Morgan, and others. She's here to help you break free from self-doubt and imposter syndrome so you can use your sensitivity as the superpower that it is. Melody is a licensed social worker with a master's degree from Columbia University and a former researcher at Rutgers University. She teaches human behavior at Hunter College and is a columnist for magazines such as Forbes, Business Insider, and Quartz. Her first book, Trust Yourself, Stop Overthinking and Channel Your Emotions into Success at Work, is available for pre-order now. I think you're going to love this episode. I do. And now, on to the show. Hey, Melody, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you today. This is going to be fun. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
110%. Absolutely. When I came across the term HSP, it was like my whole world opened up, and I just instantly felt like there was a name to so many things I had felt abstractly and had sensed. And it was just so eye-opening and validating to finally know that that this was real and that this was a thing. It wasn't me being crazy or somehow being defective or weird. It was an actual trait and actually an advantage in a lot of ways. So yes, to answer your question, yes.
How long ago did you find out?
Probably, I would say maybe 5 or 10 years ago. What's interesting is that I came across a letter that I wrote in college to someone, I think probably an ex-boyfriend. Actually, my mom came across this letter and she said, I put this letter in your room. You have to read this. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so when I finally went in and read it, it was mind-blowing. I had written this letter when I was probably a sophomore in college, and it was all about how I perceive everything so deeply, how I'm so much more deeply affected by the world. And it was just the wisdom I had at that younger age, and that was before I discovered the term being a highly sensitive person. It was just remarkable that I felt those things back then before I had any knowledge that it was a real thing. So yes, it was definitely after I was out of college. I think probably my mid-20s was when I figured it out.
Wow, that's great. What do you think of the term highly sensitive person?
That's a good question, because I hear a lot of people say that they think the term is a turnoff. And I actually I didn't take it that way. Even the first time I heard it, I didn't take it that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't perceive it as a negative. I think it just describes a state of being and a state of the way we react to and perceive and interact with the world. I think, like Elaine Aron says, I think it's a neutral term. And I think that our quality has both upsides and downsides. It's really the awareness we have around it and how we use it and act on it in the environment that we're in that can make it go in either direction. But the term itself has never rubbed me the wrong way.
Interesting. Everybody knows my thoughts, so I'm just going to refrain. Let's just jump in because I'm really excited to have this conversation. You talk about a type of HSP that you call sensitive strivers. What is a sensitive striver, and can you give us a definition?
Yeah, a sensitive striver is someone who is both highly sensitive and high achieving. So they think and feel everything more deeply. They're aware of their own emotions and those of other people. The piece that I add on to that is the ambition and the drive. So the inner drive piece. So the type of people I tend to work with, they're highly committed to their work. They want to make a big impact on the world. And they do all of that with their own inner world on overdrive. And as you know, because we process information more deeply than other people, we also tend to be more susceptible to stress, emotional overwhelm, overthinking, imposter syndrome. So in the workplace, it can be a tremendous blessing and a huge strength. I truly believe that sensitive strivers, HSPs, make some of the best leaders because of our qualities, but it can also lead to challenges. So common workplace situations like getting feedback, trusting your judgment can be more difficult for sensitive strivers.
Thank you. Just taking some copious notes here. What are some of the common challenges that sensitive strivers face in the workplace?
Yeah, some of the biggest ones, probably the biggest one that I see, is a lack of confidence that tends to show up as imposter syndrome. And my theory is that this is because as HSPs, as sensitive strivers, more sensitive folks, we are in the minority. You know, as you talk about, we're only 15 to 30% of the population. So the working world isn't built for us. And because of that, there's a lot of situations where we can feel out of place. Like, for example, a lot of times I'll talk to clients or in my group program, we often have conversations about the fact that they're reticent to speak up because they think their idea isn't valid or it's not going to be of high value or useful. When in actuality, because of our sensitive qualities, we are anticipating, we're seeing eventualities, or we have noticed a nuance that someone else has missed, yet we're holding ourselves back because, well, no one else has said it yet. It must not be a good idea, is kind of the reasoning we go through, not realizing that we're depriving people of our knowledge and our insights. So lack of confidence, imposter syndrome would really be the top challenge that I see. But there's another collection of challenges. I call it collectively the honor roll hangover, since we sensitive strivers, you know, we're diligent, we're loyal, we like to do things right. And I know Elaine Aron says that, you know, HSP's our MO is do it once, do it right. So the honor roll hangover, that sort of idea of trying to be the good girl or boy, follows us into our work life. And it is really a combination of perfectionism, people pleasing, and overfunctioning. So perfectionism isn't always wanting to be perfect or flawless. It's actually more about a self-critical lens you bring to everything, that just the not good enoughness. People pleasing, putting everybody else's needs ahead of our own, sacrificing our own beliefs and opinions in favor of other people, and then over-functioning, taking on more responsibility, doing more than our share, which can lead to burnout, fatigue, lack of boundaries, all of that sort of stuff. So those tend to be the biggest areas of challenges I see that sensitive strivers face.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that you said initially, that we do pick up on things that other people don't. And I've heard the expression, we're the canary in the coal mine, but so often we're thinking or imagining or predicting or anticipating something that other people don't say. And I've had that, I'll tell you, a lot of my episodes, I am struggling with something and I don't really talk about it. And by the time I work through it, I kind of have this thought like, I wonder if anybody else is experiencing this. And then I get emails from people going like, you're in my head. How did you get there? And I've started to learn to trust, but I think we're often the one person in a group that keeps saying things and nobody else is saying those things. But if the group is safe, we share and people go, yeah, I had that same thing. And I think that's huge. And when we're in environments where we're not validated, we learn to shut that down and to not trust it, because we often get criticized or negative messages about causing trouble or something like that.
Don't rock the boat. Stop. Why do you see everything as a problem? I often hear from clients that they feel like they're the one that's always just, and they will get feedback to this effect that they're the one that always points out problems. And that's a great thing, actually. There's someone on your team who's actually mitigating risks. But you're right, many times in our workplaces, that isn't as valued as it should be. And safety is so huge, psychological safety on teams. And, I think unfortunately, sensitive people, we sometimes are drawn to toxic environments because we think we can fix it. And because we are natural helpers, we want to bring our compassion to save the situation and turn it around and make it better. But then we end up in those environments where we're not validated. So to find a team, or even better yet, to be part of the person who advocates for the team being psychologically safe is so key.
Right. I think that there are two things: that we need to know our traits and our strengths and where we struggle. And we also need to be able to identify systems that support us, nurture us, and systems that really are not set up to honor our traits. And so many large organizations are really not set up in a very team-oriented approach that values the strengths that we have. And the HSPs that I work with often think that there's something wrong with them because they keep getting feedback that, just today in the Facebook group, somebody was talking about they got criticism from their manager that they're too detail oriented. And I said, can you give me some specific examples? And they didn't give me any. Well, how can you improve if you don't even know what the feedback is about?
Yeah. And I hear that all the time from people. And it's tough because as you move up the ranks, particularly into more management or more senior leadership positions, the way you need to show up is different. And I think actually having awareness of our own traits, but actually having awareness of other people's, that there are going to be a larger number of folks at more senior levels who do have a more dominant, direct leadership style, and being able to be aware of that and flex, but find creative ways to use our strengths. So for example, whenever I work with clients, I work with a lot of people around speaking up in meetings, which is what we were talking about before, and really getting your ideas heard. And you were just saying before, Patricia, that sometimes you'll be processing something and you won't have it fully together. You won't have your thoughts fully together until afterwards. And that's so common, where a meeting's going so fast, ideas are being exchanged, and we want to take something away and deliberate on it and think about it. And so a lot of my clients feel they will be quiet in meetings because they can't think on the spot as quickly. And then they'll beat themselves up afterwards for not saying anything. So one technique I coach my clients to use is the follow-up technique. Very simple, but after a meeting, if you're back at your desk and you're like, oh, that's what I should have said. That's the idea I wanted to offer. Be the one to follow up. Be the one to email the meeting organizers and say, you know what? I thought about this. I had some time to digest it. And here's what came up for me. No one else will do that. And I think that is our competitive advantage as HSPs, that the world is communication is so fractured. It's so fast. Yet we bring a level of thoughtfulness and, I don't want to say slowness, but deliberateness that is missing now, that people need more than ever before. So we have to value those traits and then find creative ways to insert them in today's environment.
I'm curious to ask you about something. I see this as being on a continuum, and I think some of these work for us and some of them don't. But I do see overfunctioning and perfectionism and people-pleasing as being trauma responses, that often those are left over from childhood, and it serves us because it makes other people feel really good and we're really good at this. It can also be a detriment to ourselves. So I'm curious to know what you think about that.
I think there's a lot of truth in it. I think there's a lot. I think they are learned responses. I think for a lot of people, they may not categorize them as trauma responses because they may not identify with whatever experiences they went through early on as traumatic to that extent. But I absolutely think they are learned, productive responses for that period of time, you know? And that's why I call it the honor roll hangover, is because in the systems we're brought up in, that's what works. That is what works to be successful. It's to go after the external achievements, follow the steps that are laid out for you very carefully and do good at those, get A's, go to a good school, get a great degree, get a good job, but then you end up unhappy. And maybe, you know, early on in my career, I had a really bad burnout, and it made me realize how I had chased an external definition of success that wasn't mine and had created a life, a very fast-paced, busy, demanding life that did not match my qualities and what I needed to thrive to be my best. I was never really taught about my sensitivity and how to use it and how to leverage it correctly until I was forced to. And so I think that's probably true for a lot of people, that they have these responses growing up because it's adaptive. That's the word I was looking for, adaptive in your environment. But now you get to a point in your adulthood where what got you here isn't going to get you there.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree that things that kept us alive sometimes don't work for us later on. And it's not that there's anything bad about learning how to get along with people or knowing how to be productive and successful, but we want to be able to modulate and go into them and move out of it and be able to decide how much, as opposed to feeling like if I don't get this right and somebody knows that I don't have everything together, that I have no value and worth. And so I'm going to just hustle and hustle and hustle to look like I've got everything together. And that can be really damaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to think of it as, you know, a mark of maturity is really being able to be more flexible and adaptable and look for the and that I can meet my own needs and those of other people, not just the either or. That's very perfectionistic and people pleasing. It's just black or white. You're good, you're bad. You got it right or you got it wrong. There's a spectrum, right? And so I think that's the mark of being a healthy HSP, is to find those middle grounds where you can be assertive about your own needs, respect yourself, but also be respectful and understand those of other people. That's their thing.
Yeah. And when we learn about our traits and ourselves, we really step into being empowered and educated HSPs. And I think that's when I was going to say that the statement, like we reach our full potential, but that's such an external award kind of statement. But I think that that's when we really get to appreciate the gifts of who we are and how we're wired.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was mentioning before that I was that classic gold star kid, lived to exceed expectations. I followed that path to success, went to, got high grades, went to good schools, got my master's in social work. And shortly after college, I secured a great job at a pretty fast-paced healthcare center in Manhattan. So definitely doing the hustle. And from the outside, it looked like I had it all. Like I had it all figured out. I had it all together, lived in a big city, had a good job and career path. But on the inside, it was a very, very different story. I felt like I was crumbling. I was restless. I was just depleted and an empty shell of myself. And rather than seeing my emotional state for what it was, which was a signal that I was living out of alignment with really what was best for me, I internalized it as a sign that I was a failure. And I just kept wondering, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get it together and everybody else has it figured out and I don't? So I tried to overcompensate for my insecurities, working more, trying to make other people happy. And I had also stifled my sensitivity. I hid my needs and feelings. I only let other people see what I thought they wanted to see, what they were going to approve of. And if anybody else out there has done that, you know that doesn't work. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You just build pressure until it comes up and smacks you in the face. And you create a war within yourself, which was really what it felt like. It felt like I was constantly fighting against myself until I was forced to reckon with it. I hit a really severe period of burnout. I was in bed all day, just too drained to do anything else, couldn't even pick myself up. I had heart palpitations, nightmare, my hair was falling out. And like I said, I just felt like a shell of a person. And this was in the early days of building my coaching practice. And luckily, I have a background as a therapist and social worker. So I had no choice but to use all of the tools I had learned in my training. I had to use them on myself to pick myself out of this situation. And the problem I realized wasn't so much that I was a failure at my job or I wasn't coping with the demands effectively. It was more of an internal one that I had really ignored and neglected my own well-being and needs and desires in favor of trying to appease other people, meet their judgments and expectations. I just overrode what I knew was best for myself. And so eventually, through a very long process, really regained control and started my own coaching practice. Now, fast forward 10 years, here we are, working with thousands of sensitive strivers across the world. So it's been quite a journey.
What are some of the strengths that you see that HSPs bring into the workplace?
Yeah, there's so many. I think a few of them we were mentioning before, the being deliberate in terms of when you speak, how you deliver a message. That tactfulness is very underestimated. I think there's a lot to be said for compassion, caring, empathy. I mean, more than ever before, we need to bring that human aspect into our work. I know that my clients are the first people that will ask their team, how are they doing? And they have a pulse on the team morale. They know if somebody's becoming disengaged, and I've had a lot of clients be the one to swoop in and really retain someone before leaving and actually turn them around and bring them back into the team. We're reflective and intuitive. We are very strategic actors because we do think and plan. We anticipate eventualities and see those ahead of time. We're conscientious, as you were saying, that member of your community saying they were so detail oriented. We're loyal, we're dedicated, so we are the person you can count on to get things done, who you can look to. We also value fairness, justice, inclusivity. So many of my clients are the ones that are at the helm of their DEI initiatives in their company, really wanting to bring in more diverse voices, or being the person who is facilitating cross-functionally better collaboration because they realize that more voices and input is better than one person alone.
I love that. I think people need to hear their strengths so often because we've internalized and we hear such subtle messages about why we're not okay and some of the limitations that we come up with just against ourselves and how much we can often internalize negative dialogue about, I'm too sensitive, I can't do too much. I mean, I think the thing that I hear very frequently is clients compare themselves to non-HSPs, and our culture values productivity so much. And so that sense of how come I can't go out and do 50 million things in the day and still want to keep going, and I do a couple things and then I'm sort of spent for the day.
100%. Yeah. And I think, there's a danger to internalizing that narrative that sensitivity is emotional fragility, which is not at all. I think it's actually the opposite, that it takes tremendous strength and courage to feel your feelings, to have a lot of them. We carry a lot of complex, intense emotions. To sit with that discomfort, to work through the different nuances, that takes a really high degree of personal mastery and self-management that a lot of people don't have. And the danger of internalizing that narrative is that we don't have as many HSPs in leadership positions as we need. Because, and I can tell you, lately especially, there have been so many more opportunities for my clients to step up. There's been reorgs, there's been, new projects coming down, things need to get done faster, and they're being presented with these opportunities to step up, to chair new projects, whatever it be. And the number one concern I hear is that I won't be able to handle it. I'm way too emotionally fragile for this, and the pressure is going to crush me. And I think that we internalize that narrative that, well, you're sensitive, so you can't hack it. And this is going to be too much for you. Do you really want to do that? When in actuality, what's needed to succeed at higher levels, things like influence, persuasion, building relationships are exactly what we're skilled at. So yeah, I would just, advise anyone out there who's listening to just question those stories that you've been fed about what you think your sensitivity means you are capable of or are not capable of.
Yeah, and how often we get negative messages when we are feeling passionately or we're emotional, that how it's not okay and how it really is such a strength and it takes so much courage. And often what people don't say is, I feel really uncomfortable being that vulnerable and open, and it makes me uncomfortable and I don't like it in me and I want to shut it off in you, as opposed to, man, that is pretty powerful to be able to be so clear about what you're thinking and feeling and to have the courage to show your feelings and be in the moment. Mm-hmm. But the message that we get is to button it up. And I've received that quite a lot in my life. And so I really have to continually remind myself that I got to show up and be me exactly the way that I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the name of your brand and your podcast being Unapologetically Sensitive, because how many times have you apologized for getting too excited or crying? For example, I know personally, if I'm moved, the tears will come. Even if I'm not upset, if I'm happy, the tears will come. And so many, I definitely have fallen into this category in the past of then apologizing for, I'm sorry. And instead saying, I'm just so passionate. I'm so happy that this is happening, and just owning it. So I think there's a part that we can step into that too, to also help be part of changing that belief that we should be apologizing and should just have a blank slate, that don't let them see you sweat type of mentality.
Right. Right. I'm totally a crier. And I'll tell you, in every single online group that I run and every single client that cries, they will apologize. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, we celebrate tears here. All your feelings are okay. And it's such a shift for people because many of us have been taught. And I will often get tearful when clients are going through something emotional because I just feel a lot of empathy for them. And I see these threads in therapist groups about not showing your feelings. And it's like, as long as I don't lose it, nobody needs to take care of me. It's a human relationship. Mm-hmm. And how much depth we can have with our relationships with our clients when we allow our natural responses to just happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's such a point of connection.
Yeah. And what we're so good at, we've learned that it's not okay and to shut it down. It's just fascinating to me. A big challenge for HSPs in the workplace is imposter syndrome. What can we do about that?
Yeah. So the first strategy I always like to start with, I'm going to give listeners some strategies that are more bite-sized, things that you can put into practice today. So one I always like to start with is naming your inner critic, giving it some sort of identity that is separate from you, preferably something that is more silly or lighthearted. Can be a movie character, a cartoon character, or a name that calls to you. But the purpose of this is to create distance from that voice. Because with imposter syndrome, the thoughts become so automatic. The thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, they're going to figure out I have no idea what I'm doing. We become so fused with those thoughts rather than realizing that they're just fleeting words in our head that we have a choice whether we believe or don't believe. And so naming your inner critic, it's just a small tool to help you gain some psychological distance and just enough time to question if that thought is serving you and whether you want to believe it or not.
I love that. Was there more?
I can go on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next would be keeping a brag file. Now, I know the word brag may make people want to cringe, but just hear me out. Your brag file is a document, Word, Google Doc, Evernote, what have you, where you are keeping a log of at least 3 wins from each day. And by a win, I don't mean something earth-shatteringly wonderful happened. It could be. That's awesome. But every day is not going to be like that. So a win, this also requires that we check our perfectionism at the door and realize that a win can encompass overcoming some sort of resistance, having a difficult conversation, standing up for ourselves and setting a boundary. It could be positive feedback you've gotten, projects going really well, but it doesn't have to. And so the purpose of your brag file is to help start rewiring your brain away from that ultra negativity bias of imposter syndrome, always looking out for where am I failing? What's my weakness? How can I improve that? And instead looking at what's going well. Because a hallmark of imposter syndrome is an inability to internalize your successes. And so your brag file helps you start undoing that so that you are paying attention to what is going well. You are starting to take that in as part of your identity. And then the last would be to work on accepting compliments. It sounds really simple, but we were talking about over apologizing before, which is one subtle way that we undermine ourselves and feel bad for taking up space and existing in the world. Pushing away compliments is the same. It's a bad habit we have where we are deferring, taking in credit and confidence, and instead saying, oh, it was no big deal, or yeah, that part went well, but here's all the other things that didn't work out. And we explain it away of why it didn't matter or wasn't good enough, rather than just saying, thank you so much. I'm so glad you shared that with me. It means a lot, which I would challenge everyone today to just, in response to a compliment, just say thank you and leave it at that. It's remarkably hard, but to also look at how uncomfortable it makes you, because there's really good data there.
I love that. I'm saying a little too much of myself and you talking, so I'm having this internal process as we're talking and going, isn't that interesting? So it's just fascinating to me. And before we started recording, I was getting the links together for the show notes. So I popped onto your website and saw your book and your website. And we talked about this before we started recording, like I got a little jelly and was sharing that with you and said, like, I'm not asking you to do anything. I just want to name what's going on. I love you. You just accepted that so beautifully without, I don't know, trying to make me feel more comfortable, because that really wasn't what I was looking for.
And I appreciated you saying what you needed in that situation. You said, here's why here's the context for what I'm sharing this and what I am and am not looking for. I think that is so helpful for you to have that awareness over it and to share that with someone else. Setting expectations is so huge for us HSPs, knowing what to expect and not dealing in uncertainty and ambiguity. So I think that applies more broadly to the workplace, where having conversations with people about when can I expect to hear from you? What sort of timeframes do you need me to reply in? When we give feedback, if I have to share something critical with you, how do you want to receive that? And just having those types of really explicit conversations with people can help you establish that safety and comfort with being able to say those hard things. So I was so glad you said that.
Yeah, I really love being transparent. I think it's so easy for us to go into comparing, or to feel like it's not okay to share those things, or to feel like it's not okay to have envy or jealousy. And as we're talking, what I'm thinking about is I'm in this place in my business where I'm stretching and growing and doing new things. And we were talking a little bit about, I'm getting clear on what my branding is, and what I currently have just doesn't meet my needs. And there's always a sense of striving for the next thing and needing to acknowledge the progress that we've made. And I think sometimes I struggle with that because I get so into what's next that I sort of miss where I've come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, in my book, thank you for mentioning that, I do talk about there being a framework to really understand our qualities as sensitive strivers, one of which being inner drive, being that ambition piece of always wanting to be learning, growing, getting to the next rung, which can be wonderful. We are constantly improving and we're bettering ourselves and the world and people around us. But at the same time, we can put an undue burden on ourselves, comparison. We can be shoulding ourselves to death. And so it's a balance, right? It's about finding and having that discernment to figure out where is the trait serving you and where might you need to dial it down in some ways.
Yeah. And it's so easy. Sometimes I don't even see it. My business coach and I also talk a little bit on the side, and I was just sharing about something that was going on. And when she responded to me, she's like, you really need to talk to your boss. And I kind of thought like, oh, I didn't even realize what I was doing and that I am the one that's in charge. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's so important that we talk about what goes on because she caught something that I just didn't even catch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have trouble seeing our own blind spots, right? And it can be so helpful to have that reflected back to you.
Yeah. I think so much about success too is about feeling the fear and doing the thing anyways. I know even going to get my master's degree, because every time going from elementary to middle school to high school, every step in education, I kept waiting like it's going to get hard and I'm not going to be able to do it. And so going to a graduate program felt really intimidating. And I'm a little embarrassed saying this, but I looked at somebody who had a master's degree and I thought, holy moly, if she could do it, I could do it. And I think sometimes we almost need to see things like that. And people that I've seen that are very successful, sometimes they don't have anything that special, but they're incredibly persistent and they put themselves out there. And sometimes it's just doing that thing and learning how to do it. It's not about doing it perfectly or that people have these great skills. It's just they're willing to put themselves out there and figure out how to do it. And I don't think that people understand that. They think that you've got to get all your stuff together and you have to have these magic things, and you just show up and you do what you can do, and it's good enough. Done is better than perfect.
100%. It's persistence. It's going forward in the face of setbacks. And I think that's so key for us more sensitive folks, is not to internalize those setbacks as I did something bad, I'm not cut out for this, I can't handle this, but as a normal, expected part of the process, that this is what everyone goes through, and this actually means I'm right on time, right?
And knowing that mistakes and errors are part of the learning process and that it's okay. And every time I do something new, I may have talked about this on the podcast before, I'm not sure, that we set up a merchandise store. So if you love the Unapologetically Sensitive theme and logo, we have a merchandise store. You can go to patriciayounglcsw.com. But as I set this up, we ran into all kinds of problems, and I found myself getting angry and frustrated. And I thought, oh, wait, I haven't ever done this before. I couldn't have anticipated that there were going to be problems, and some of the merchandise didn't look great, and I was getting frustrated. It's like, how am I supposed to know if I've never done this before? And then I did another project with somebody else and bumped up against that frustration when things weren't working out. And I had to go, oh yeah, this is that thing again where there's a learning curve with every time that there's something new, or I bring somebody on board to help me out that I don't know what I'm not communicating. And once I recognize that it's okay to make mistakes, it's just part of the process. And so when I bump up against it, I go like, oh, it's that thing again.
Exactly. Oh, it's being a beginner.
Yeah.
All over again. Instead of putting those expectations on ourselves to have it all figured out and know the answers all by ourselves. And to your point, or going back really earlier, what you were talking about, the trauma response, is that I think many times as sensitive people, we do turn inward because we have not been understood. So we do think we have to do it all on our own because, well, no one else will understand what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to achieve or get at. So I just have to be that rugged individualist and do it by myself, right? And so learning to ask for help, and that's okay, and that doesn't make you weak or somehow, it's actually, I think, a sign of strength to bring in other people to help you. It's quite a skill to find the right people, as I'm sure you know. That has been a tremendous learning curve for me personally.
Yeah, and that sense of interdependence. And our culture does not like us to be dependent, and even the term interdependence, and I see it used as codependency. And we need people. We need to rely on people. It's a healthy thing. We want it to be mutual. We want there to be reciprocity. And sometimes I'm going to be leaning on you more than you're leaning on me, and other times you're going to be leaning on me more than I'm leaning on you. But as long as there's that fluidity, it is really healthy to need other people and to need help and to have to ask for help. And when we have childhood emotional neglect or trauma, it is hard. I struggle with it. And when I'm feeling particularly vulnerable, it's even harder for me to ask. And it's not uncommon that my husband and I will talk about something. I'm like, yeah, I really want, like, he called after golfing and he didn't offer to get food on the way home. And I really wanted him to, and I just couldn't ask. And when he came home, he talked about it. He's like, I would have stopped. I'm like, I just couldn't even ask. And sometimes that happens and I'm okay with it. It's not a constant state, but I think also to have self-compassion, to know that there are times when it's just a lot harder for me to ask than other times. And like, that's just how it is.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And well, I think also as an HSP, really working with your energy, because we are so much more attuned to our internal states, but sometimes we don't have the language or the tools to be aware of how those energy shifts actually affect our behavior and our actions. And so one thing that has been really helpful to me, I also find I would beat myself up where I just have periods where I'm very low energy or just uninspired. And I would try to force myself, just work through it, plow through it, be the hard worker, and it wouldn't work. Every single time it would backfire. And so now I know when I feel that, when that starts creeping up on me, I'm much more in touch with my own inner sense and my own intuition about, I know this isn't a time I should push. I know that what I need to do here is just disconnect, go do something else and come back to this when I'm ready. So really being able to follow your energy in that way and use it as a directional signal can be really powerful.
That's huge. And we've all learned how to push through. So everybody knows how to push through. But what I find is that as HSPs, we have these rhythms, what I call expansive. When I'm more extroverted, I'm doing more videos, you're going to see me more out there. My energy is high. Sometimes I think like, I've arrived. And then it's like, it's not a permanent state. I'm like, darn. Yep. And then I get more contractive and I do need to pull back and my energy is lower. And it's funny, today is a day where I would normally paddle and I didn't. So I didn't have anything on the books for today and I had a lot of work to do, but I just wanted to go sit on the front porch where it's warm. And I thought, I'm going to go sit on the front porch where it's warm because that's just what I need. And when we can really learn to trust those rhythms, it always works for us. But there's so much fear, especially if we are perfectionistic and we feel like we've got to push through and get stuff done. But it can be so dishonoring when we do that.
Yeah. And that's so common. That gets to the strive side of sensitive strivers, which is they put so much pressure on themselves to succeed, to perform highly, and it's motivated. Their primary motivation, their fuel is fear. It's self-criticism. But really, what's the more pure and longer lasting form of motivation is self-compassion and being kinder to yourself. But that is such a mind shift for someone who has been motivated by fear for so long. It feels like giving up your security blanket. It's really scary to make that leap. But it makes, once my clients start doing that, the change that they see it's night and day difference.
So much of what I see HSPs struggle with is looking externally for the rules or what we're supposed to do because we are the minority. And so much of it is about learning to turn inward and to figure out, what am I needing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? How can I care for myself? But it's so scary because we have this society where we think that being angry with ourselves or pushing ourselves or negatively encouraging ourselves is going to motivate us about, things like, this is my bias, but counting calories or restricting food, or if I just am mean enough to myself, I can motivate myself to exercise, or I'm not going to buy. I mean, I know this is all very body focused right now, so I guess it's just where my brain is able to pull examples, but I'm not going to get new clothes until I fit into something, as opposed to if I've put on weight, and many of us have during COVID, we need to have clothes and bras that fit us, that we feel really happy in. And the fear is that I'm not going to be motivated. And so I have to be miserable and hate myself to motivate myself. And when we know that we are perfectly okay exactly where we are in the moment, nothing needs to change from that place of self-compassion and love, we can come to a place of making loving choices that aren't this restrictive, forceful, mean thing that we do.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Oh, thanks. I don't know where I pulled that up. I have to say my gremlins have been up. Like after I gave the example of my husband going out, my gremlins said like, that was a really stupid example. Why did you do that? And I thought,
I like that example.
Thanks for sharing.
It's very relatable. I have been there.
Thanks for sharing, little gremlins. Can you talk about speaking up and using our voice more?
Absolutely. So this is, as I was saying before, such a huge challenge for sensitive strivers and HSPs, but it's so critical. Your visibility and getting your voice heard is so crucial now more than ever before, where we're all working remotely, at least for the time being, and you do need to be so much more explicit and proactive with your communication because we don't have as many spontaneous interactions as before. So one tendency that a lot of my clients fall into is over-explaining. Especially when we get nervous, we tend to just ramble on because we lose our train of thought and we just think, oh my gosh, now I'm too deep. I have to keep talking. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And you just kind of keep verbal vomiting. Or we want to prove we know what we're talking about. And we think that volume will prove that we're competent. So a few techniques I can share for overcoming the fear of speaking up and speaking more concisely. First is speaking up early. You don't necessarily have to be the first person to speak, but be in the first 2 to 3 people to speak if possible. This is important for a few reasons. First is that you get your ideas out on the table before someone else has a chance to share them, because that's also a common barrier is that you wait too long, then someone else has shared your idea, you're even more discouraged, and so then you don't say anything. So speak up early for that reason. But the second is that it helps you overcome your own internal resistance. If you let the fear will just continue to build and it will be harder to overcome as it goes on. So speak up early. Be the person to ask questions, ask thoughtful questions that add nuance, context, that bring the conversation deeper. Rather than just putting pressure on yourself to have some sort of unique, groundbreaking idea that's going to completely blow everybody away, don't slot yourself only into that role. Again, be the one to ask a lot of the deeper questions about how are we going to accomplish this? What are we not looking at here? In terms of being more concise, thinking in frameworks can be really helpful. So structuring your information in terms of numbers. I'm going to share with you 3 tips right now to do whatever. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Helps you keep on track. It also helps your audience pay attention to what the most important information is that you're trying to share so they actually listen to you. Or pillars. There are 3 pillars to this strategy that we're going to follow. I already mentioned the follow-up strategy, so following up after a meeting to share your ideas and get them seen. But you can also, in advance, send a pre-read. So if you do have a lot of information that you want to share, again, we're deep thinkers, we care about the details and the context, you can share a pre-read. And that might have more detailed information in it. It might have analytics. It might have questions that you want people to think about and come prepared with. So you can share that in advance, and it shows your conscientiousness, shows your attention to detail, and that you're going above and beyond and not just winging it when you get in the room. And then last is 2 strategies. One is called bridging. One is called flagging. So bridging is whenever you're caught off guard by a topic or a question, let's say, and you need to bring it back to something you know about. So let's say, Patricia, in this interview, let's say you asked me something and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I have no idea how I would answer that. I might say, you know what, before we go there, let me back up and tell you about XYZ. So with bridging statements, you're building a bridge back to a topic you're more comfortable about. Flagging statements are like putting a flag in the ground. So you're bringing somebody's attention to what the most important information is. So one I really like is if you walk away with one thing from listening to this podcast, I want it to be this. I want it to be bridging and flagging. So you can use these sort of statements to highlight what your most important point is and for you to be much more concise about what that most important point actually is, rather than just kind of rambling on and not knowing what you're saying.
I'm curious to ask in the beginning when you talk about speaking up early, because I'm not an introvert, Does that work for introverts?
It does. It does. I would say most of my clients are on more of the introverted side. It works for introverts, especially if you are comfortable with the people in the room. So if you are someone who is more introverted, you do need to make a more concerted effort to build relationships with the other leaders, stakeholders, your coworkers who will be in that meeting, having coffee chats with people, trying to understand what their priorities and pain points are, what are they working on, so that you feel you have a higher comfort level when you get in the room with them, as well as arriving early. Getting yourself settled, making sure your technology works. If you feel rushed or if you feel stressed in the moment, all bets are off. And preparing. If there is an agenda, make sure you look at the agenda. If there is somewhere you want to contribute, let the organizer know so that when that time comes, they can pass the baton over to you and say, Patricia, you mentioned you had something you wanted to comment on this project. And they can hand it over to you. It makes it much easier for you to interject rather than trying to find a space to hop in.
Yeah. And if you are the first, second, or third person to share and nobody responds, that I speak from experience. You've got to have self-talk to manage and just because nobody responds doesn't mean that it's not valid or a good idea, depending on the venue and what's going on. Sometimes people just don't know what to say and how to respond. But I've had that before because I tend to like to go early on so I get it out. And then I sat with that like nobody's saying anything and then really having to talk myself through that internally.
Yeah. And, there's also nothing wrong with looping back to say, hey, I shared this earlier and I didn't get that much feedback on it. What did you think about that? That takes courage to do, as does sitting with the silence. And I know, being a licensed social worker, that is a huge part of our training is getting comfortable just sitting with silence and not filling spaces, not talking over. And particularly in the professional environment on Zoom, just getting comfortable sitting there and giving people a second to digest and even saying, I see what I shared with you. You may need a minute to think about. So take a moment to digest and then just being quiet.
And then tell me what a fabulous idea it
exactly.
is.
And then tell me how amazing I am.
We need to wrap up, but before we do you have any tips for helping HSPs better manage stress so that they can be more successful?
Yes. Right now, boundaries and compartmentalizing work is so key because we have lost those concrete boundaries between work and home. We're living at work now. So creating your own disconnection practices is so crucial. So having some sort of an evening routine that helps you wrap up and put closure on the day, that can be doing your brag file. I have clients who, will change their clothes, take a shower, close down their computer, whatever it is. Having that sort of disconnection practice is so key. And also making sure that whatever type of stimulus you're taking in at night is not amping you up. So you're not going back to the computer after work to just try to squeeze out a few more emails because you're going to send your nervous system careening, and it's going to be hard to come down from that in time to sleep.
I love that. I often will say I've left the office, like I'm not in the office because I do have a dedicated office, but I found recently that because my email is also on my phone, that I'd go into the living room after my work day and my editor would send me something or I'd get a work email. And because I check my email, my personal email is connected, I was just feeling irritable because I wasn't getting that break. And so I'm not willing to not check my email, but I did let my editor know that after I leave the office at night, I'm just going to wait until the next morning and thinking about, do I need to get a separate phone or a way to separate that out more because I don't get that break. And it really does. I feel compelled to respond and I don't get the break that I need.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you on that. So I actually keep separate inboxes and I will not add certain inboxes on my phone. So I'm not tempted to do that. As well as there's a tool called Inbox Pause, which I think is free for Gmail and I believe Outlook. And it will pause your inbox. It will send all of your mail to a hidden folder, but it really helps with that tendency to want to, I'm just like you. If I see something, I have to respond ASAP. And so it really helps with that tendency and kind of just keeps you calm.
Yeah. Yeah. More systems.
Yeah.
Melody, tell us about your book. Tell us where people can find you. Tell us about what you have to offer people. Tell us all that good stuff and give us your social media and all of that. This will be in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com. Go to the podcast page and click on Melody's episode, or if you have show notes in your podcast player, but Melody's going to give it to y'all now.
Thank you so much. So my book is called Trust Yourself, Stop Overthinking, and Channel Your Emotions for Success at Work. And it is available for pre-order now, so you can get it wherever books are sold. You can also go directly to melodywilding.com/book. And it is really a guide for regaining your confidence, mastering your emotions, and reaching your full potential in the workplace. And I've given it a lot of special care to make sure it's highly actionable, a lot of strategies, tips, worksheets, exercises in there. So make sure you grab that. And then otherwise, you can find me at my website, melodywilding.com, and on social media, pretty much everywhere at melodywilding.
And do you do training for sensitive strivers or groups?
I do. Thank you for asking. So I do offer one-on-one coaching, and I have a group program called Resilient specifically designed for sensitive strivers, tackling many of the challenges we talked about today. So if you're interested in that, you can find that all at my website.
Love it. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to talk about in 2 minutes or less?
Ooh, I think really briefly, just to continue on with that idea of boundaries and disconnection, is to be viewing relaxation as an investment. Because I think so many times we beat ourselves up and we judge ourselves for needing more downtime than other people and time to restore. But that's exactly what it is. You need to think about yourself as an athlete, and that is your recovery time, and it's a necessary investment in you being at your best for yourself and everybody else around you.
And I think during COVID, I have not been able to read a book. I just cannot focus. I used to do a lot of crafts that I'm getting a little bit more regulated, but it's really been challenging. And a number of the people that I talk to, we've got a beautiful, well, it's not a beautiful, we have this front porch and it's sunny and it's warm. And I often find just sitting out there, having a meal out there, sitting out there with the dog is really restorative, and I'm not doing anything. And I hear other people saying, I just sit on the couch and I stare. We need that downtime. And I think we have this idea that we should be taking a walk or we should be doing something productive, and our nervous systems need to regulate. And if you get enjoyment sitting and staring at the wall, that's really important to do.
Exactly. You don't need to turn your downtime into a productivity exercise. You just need to be. And if just being right now looks like sitting on your couch, then that's what it is. And that's completely okay.
Yeah. Melody, thank you so much for being here today. I know that people are going to love everything that you shared with them. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Hey again. So what'd you think? I love all the tangible tips and tools that she gave. I just found it really helpful. So I'm curious to know, what did you think? She's quite impressive with all the things that she's done. I think that by the time you hear this, there's one more day to register for the online HSP course. Because I'm recording in advance, it may be too late. So if you're interested in taking the course and you missed the registration deadline, which is 3/24, I think I may start getting a wait list for the next course, which will be running, I think, in June or July. If you're craving a sense of community and support, you want to be around other people that get you, you want to learn more about the trait and really learn how to settle into the strengths and the gifts that you have and to work through some of the challenges, talking about boundaries and perfectionism and embracing your emotions. These courses have been really transformational. Yeah, I think they've been really transformational. So just letting you know, if you want to find anything about me on my social media, the things that I have to offer are at unapologeticallysensitive.com. I'm creating quite a bit of content right now on Instagram and TikTok, almost daily videos about the trait of being an HSP. If you're interested, no pressure at all. And we have the closed Facebook group, Unapologetically Sensitive. You need to answer a couple questions so that we know that you're a listener of the podcast. We've got a great community over there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. And I think that's it. I hope you are doing well. By the time you hear this, it will be springtime. Hopefully, there's a sense of renewal and freshness. My hope is that with COVID, our numbers will be going down by then, and we can just enjoy the springtime, because it's been a really tough year, and we're doing it, and we're getting through it, and COVID and everything around it has been challenging. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.